Tonight, when the lights go out, your room will change, even though the walls are still there, the floor is still there, and the chair in the corner is still only a chair, no matter how quickly your brain tries to turn it into something with shoulders. But the real answer is far stranger, because your fear of the dark is not really about darkness at all. It is about uncertainty, and deep inside your nervous system, uncertainty still looks like teeth waiting just outside the edge of what you can see. You know the feeling the moment it happens. When you turn off the light and walk across a room you understood perfectly 5 seconds earlier. But now the closet has become a black rectangle, the hallway has become a tunnel, and the quiet feels louder than noise because your brain has lost the details it uses to prove that everything is safe. So why does a familiar place become suspicious the moment light disappears? The answer begins before houses, before lamps, before cities, and before the simple comfort of knowing that nothing larger than you is waiting just beyond the doorway. Because for most of human history, night was not just a background behind life. It was an environment that changed what your ancestors could see, where they could move, what could hunt them, and how far their senses could reach. Darkness did not create danger, it hid danger. And that difference matters because your brain is not afraid of blackness as a color, it is afraid of missing information. The blank spaces where a shape could be harmless or could be something that moves. In daylight, your eyes flood the brain with edges, distance, faces, movement, paths, exits, and tiny changes in the world around you. But in darkness, the brain receives less detail, less certainty, and less proof that the world is exactly what it was before. This is why the dark can make a familiar room feel newly unfamiliar, because the brain is not storing your bedroom as one perfect picture. It is constantly rebuilding the room from signals, memories, expectations, and little checks that happen so quickly you usually never notice them. When the light is on, the brain can confirm the bed, the door, the window, the chair, the pile of clothes, the charger on the floor, and the shape of the wall. But when the light is gone, it has to lean harder on memory, and memory is not the same as seeing. Memory says the room should be safe, but perception says the details are missing. And when memory and perception do not fully agree, the nervous system often trusts the more cautious signal. So what does the brain do when information disappears? It guesses, and because your nervous system was shaped in a world where one wrong guess could be final, it usually guesses cautiously, as if the safest answer is not the most pleasant answer, but the one that keeps the body alive long enough to check again. If your ancestor heard a crack in the bushes at night and assumed it was the wind, but it was a predator, that mistake could be deadly. While if your ancestor assumed it was a predator and it was only the wind, the cost was a burst of fear, a faster heartbeat, and maybe a few embarrassed breaths in the dark. One mistake was annoying and the other mistake was fatal, so which kind of mistake would evolution rather make? This is often called the smoke detector principle, and the psychiatrist Randolph Ness has used this idea to explain why many defensive emotions can feel so sensitive. Because a smoke detector that screams when you burn toast is irritating, but a smoke detector that stays quiet during a real fire is useless. Your fear system works in a similar way, which means it would rather overreact to a harmless shadow than underreact to a real threat. And in the dark, your brain becomes a very sensitive smoke detector, searching for danger in every missing detail. This is why ordinary sounds can suddenly feel personal at night, when a pipe clicks, a floorboard shifts, or a branch taps the window, because your mind does not simply hear a sound. It asks what made that sound, whether that thing can move towards you, and whether you can see clearly enough to escape if it does. That is a lot of questions for one tiny noise, but the older brain does not care whether the noise is tiny. It cares whether the source is known. There is a reason the question feels so automatic, because the human brain is a prediction machine, always trying to guess what will happen next before it happens, and the less clear the world becomes, the more aggressively it tries to fill in the missing pieces. In daylight, prediction feels effortless because reality corrects it instantly, but at night, when the correction is delayed or incomplete, the prediction can become louder than the world itself. That is why a soft sound in the dark can seem to grow after it ends, as your mind replays it, stretches it, places it in different corners of the room, and tries to decide whether it belongs to the house, the wind, another person, or something you would rather not name. Your visual system is part of the story, because humans are deeply visual animals, with a large part of the brain devoted to processing sight, and sight matters because it lets you act before contact happens. You can avoid a cliff before stepping off it, notice an angry face before the argument begins, and see movement in tall grass before anything reaches you, which means light gives the brain prediction, while darkness steals prediction. Researchers have studied how the brain reacts when vision becomes uncertain, and one important structure is the amygdala. a small almond-shaped part deep in the brain that is often involved in detecting threat and preparing the body to respond before a full explanation has arrived. The amygdala does not wait for perfect evidence, especially when a signal is unclear, and that speed can save time, but it can also make a jacket on a chair look strangely alive for half a second before your slower, calmer mind catches up. Have you ever felt your body react before your mind had time to explain what happened? That is your ancient system moving first, while your rational mind arrives a moment later and says that it is only laundry, only a shelf, only a chair, only the shape of your own room seen without enough light. But by then, the older system may have already fired, your heart is faster, your muscles are tighter, your attention is sharper, and your body has begun preparing before the story is confirmed. Because in darkness, the body does not wait for courtroom-level evidence. It works with scraps. The brain also has to separate two very different kinds of fear, the fear that comes from a real object and the fear that comes from an unclear possibility. Because seeing a dangerous animal in front of you is one kind of problem, but wondering whether something is hidden nearby is another kind of problem entirely. The second kind can last longer because it has no clean ending, no obvious proof, and no single thing to point at, so the fear keeps searching for a shape that would explain why the body is already tense. This is why uncertainty can feel worse than bad news, because bad news has a form, while uncertainty keeps the imagination working. This is also why shadows are so powerful, because a shadow is not really an object, it is missing light. But your brain treats missing light as a place where an object could be hiding, and the less detail your eyes receive, the more your imagination supplies. This ability can be useful when the guess is accurate, but it becomes exhausting when the guess turns a coat into a figure, a hallway into a threat, or a harmless corner into a question your body cannot stop asking. The psychologist Martin Seligman proposed the idea of preparedness, which means humans and other animals may learn some fears more easily than others, because those fears were useful in the past, and darkness belongs to the same family as snakes, spiders, heights, deep water, and angry faces. You can learn to fear almost anything if life teaches you to fear it, but your brain is already halfway prepared to worry about the unseen thing in the dark, because for your ancestors, not seeing was often the danger itself. At night, humans were clever, social, tool-using animals, but they were also bodies with weak night vision compared with many predators, and alone in the dark, the human advantage became smaller. Cats, wolves, leopards, hyenas, and other night-active animals did not need daylight the way humans did, and while your ancestors had fire, memory, tools, and each other, those advantages were strongest inside the circle of light and weakest beyond it. Even the human body tells this story, because your eyes can adjust to darkness, but they do not become the eyes of a nocturnal hunter, and the world you see in low light is washed of color, softened at the edges, and filled with motion that is easier to sense than to identify. In bright light, you can inspect a thing, but in darkness, you often only detect that something changed. And detecting change without identifying cause is exactly the kind of half message that wakes up the alarm. Your hearing becomes more important. Your skin becomes more alert, and even your breathing can feel too loud, as if your whole body is trying to become a listening device. There is evidence that predator pressure shaped primate evolution, and anthropologist Donna Hart and others have argued that predation was a serious force in the lives of early humans and their ancestors, not just a rare detail in the background. Bones, bite marks, and ecological comparisons all suggest that ancient humans were sometimes prey, not always, not helplessly, but often enough for the brain to remember danger in the design of its alarms. So what would darkness mean to a creature that was both clever and edible? It would mean stay close, listen carefully, keep the fire alive, do not wander too far from the group, and remember that the edge of the light is not just scenery, it is a border between what the mind can check and what the mind must imagine. Inside the glow, faces are visible, hands are moving, food is shared, stories are told, and other bodies confirm that the world is still known. But outside the glow, the world becomes guesswork. Fire changed the night, but it did not erase fear, and the anthropologist Richard Wrangham has argued that fire and cooking transformed human evolution by changing food, bodies, time, and social life. Fire also changed darkness because it pushed the unknown outward, making a circle where humans could see one another, cook, talk, rest, and keep some animals away. But every circle of light creates a center and an edge. That circle also changed the mind, because it gave humans a place where attention could loosen, where stories could begin, where children could sleep, where tools could be repaired, and where the strange noises beyond the light could be shared instead of carried alone. If one person heard a sound, others could listen too. and if nobody else reacted, the body gained a powerful message, not because the sound disappeared, but because the group helped interpret it. Safety was not only the absence of danger, it was the presence of other nervous systems agreeing that the moment did not require panic. That edge is still inside your imagination, which is why the doorway, the hallway, the bottom of the stairs, and the closet can become modern edges of the firelight. Places where your brain quietly says that information stops here. This is why fear of the dark often becomes fear of what might be there, not what is there, because your brain is built to simulate possibilities, to imagine tomorrow, remember yesterday, plan a route, predict a face, and rehearse a sentence before you say it. In the dark, that same imagination becomes a projector, throwing possible danger onto empty space and filling the missing details with whatever your threat system thinks you should check first. The neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux has studied fear circuits and how the brain processes threats, and his work helped show that fear is not one simple thing, but a braid of fast defensive responses, conscious feelings, memories, and bodily reactions. This matters because you can know you are safe and still feel afraid, because knowledge is not always the first system to speak, and sometimes the body has already voted before your thoughts have formed a sentence. That is why telling yourself there is nothing there may not work immediately, because the sentence is rational, but the fear is older than sentences, and your body wants evidence rather than reassurance alone. Light is evidence, a familiar voice is evidence, the sound of another person moving nearby is evidence, a locked door can be evidence, and the brain relaxes when uncertainty becomes smaller. This is also why looking directly at the thing helps, because the moment you turn on a light and see the jacket, the chair, the open closet door, or the harmless pile of clothes, the brain can finally replace possibility with object. The monster becomes furniture, the threat becomes fabric, and the shape that felt alive becomes ordinary again, not because the room changed, but because uncertainty lost its hiding place. The relief can feel almost silly afterward, but that silliness is part of the design, because the system is meant to make you check first and feel embarrassed later, not stay calm first and discover danger too late. Children often fear the dark because their imagination is powerful and their ability to test reality is still developing, but adults do not outgrow the basic machinery. They only become better at managing it. You may not run from your bedroom, and you may laugh at yourself while turning on your phone light and pretending you only needed to check something, but the old system is still there, waiting for the room to lose its edges. There is also a social layer because humans did not survive the night with sharper senses alone. They survived it together, and a group hears more, sees more, remembers more, and can take turns watching the edge of the dark. This is why fear often softens when someone else is in the room, because the dark did not change, but your nervous system gained backup. Loneliness and darkness can make each other stronger because when you are alone at night, the mind has fewer signals of safety, no nearby voice, no shared attention, and no other body calmly confirming that the sound was nothing. Your brain becomes both watcher and watched, forced to monitor the room and comfort itself at the same time, which is a difficult job for a system that was built to relax inside a group. This is why the same dark room can feel different depending on your state before the lights go out. Because if your day was calm, your body may enter the dark, already carrying safety. But if you are stressed, lonely, overstimulated, or emotionally raw, the dark has more fear to amplify. The room becomes a screen for the nervous system, and what appears on that screen is partly shaped by what your body was already holding. This does not mean the fear is imaginary in a dismissive way, because imagination is not fake to the body. It is one of the tools the body uses to prepare for what could happen next. Modern darkness is safer than ancient darkness, but your body does not always update quickly, because your apartment is not a savanna, your hallway is not a forest path, and your closet is not a cave mouth, yet the cues are familiar enough to wake the old alarm. Low light, unclear shapes, sudden noises, isolation, and uncertainty are ancient signals, and the brain does not respond only to statistics, it responds to cues that once mattered. This is why horror movies know exactly what to remove, because they remove light, certainty, the group, and fast information. Then they make you wait, knowing that the monster matters less than the gap before you see it. The dark hallway matters because your brain fills it before the camera does, which means horror does not invent your fear. It borrows your nervous system and plays it back to you in a controlled room. But the dark is not only fear, because it is also imagination, sleep, secrecy, rest, and wonder. And your ancestors did not only tremble at night, they watched stars, told stories, dreamed near fires, and learned the sounds of their place. The same darkness that hid danger also opened the sky, and the same uncertainty that sharpened fear also made room for myth, meaning, and memory. This is one of the most interesting parts of the dark because it does not simply remove the world, it changes the kind of world the brain can build. In daylight, the world presses itself onto you with edges and facts, but at night, the mind has more room to participate, which is why fears, memories, ideas, regrets, and dreams can all become louder after sunset. The dark takes away some information from the eyes, but it gives more space to the inner theater, and that theater can produce terror, comfort, creativity, or awe depending on what the nervous system believes is possible. So what happens when the brain cannot see the world clearly? It makes meaning, turning a rustle into a threat, a star into a story, a shadow into a figure, and a dream into a message, because darkness expands whatever the mind brings into it. If your body brings fear, darkness becomes a mouth, but if your body brings safety, darkness becomes rest. That is why rituals matter. Whether it is a nightlight, a locked door, a familiar song, a lamp left on in the hallway, a pet sleeping nearby, or a bedtime routine that tells the nervous system the world is known enough to release its grip. These may look small, but they are safety cues, and you are not childish for wanting them, because the human body has always needed signals that the edge of the dark is not the edge of survival. A ritual works because it gives the brain a sequence it can predict, and prediction is the opposite of the kind of uncertainty that makes the dark feel threatening. When the same small actions happen in the same order, the nervous system learns that the night is not an ambush, it is a pattern, and a pattern can be entered without scanning every shadow as if it were a message. That is why the cure is not always bravery in the dramatic sense, because sometimes it is simply giving the body enough familiar evidence that it can stop trying to solve the room. Your fear of the dark is not proof that you are irrational, it is proof that your brain is built from older nights. Nights without switches, nights without walls, nights where the edge of vision could be the edge of life itself. The fear is not always correct, but it is understandable because it comes from a system designed to protect a fragile body in a world where missing information could become danger. So tonight, when the lights go out, notice what changes. Because the room may be the same, the chair may still be a chair, and the hallway may still be empty. But your brain is doing something ancient. It is asking for information, asking for safety, and asking where the firelight ends. Tonight, when the lights go out, your room will change because your oldest brain is still watching the dark.